I started driving up to see my two children on the motorway, and as I was driving up, getting quite a long way down the motorway, there was a woman sitting beside of me, and I thought, oh dear, what's going on here? But as it went on, and this lady was with me for a while, I just happened to look in my mirror behind me, and there was a little girl with blonde hair, and her face was all funny, and now I was starting to shake. I was actually getting quite scared. And as I was driving and kept going on and on the motorway, these were with me for a little while, and I was sort of doing 30 in a 70 because I was that sort of nervous at one point. Anyway, as time went on and these souls were with me, we were sort of coming closer to the motorway, and it was all the flashing blue lights. And as we went further on, as I looked on the floor, there was a little blonde-haired girl on the floor dead. Clairsentience is when you feel that spirit around you, so it's a feeling, overwhelming feeling that you know that there's a lady there.
I can walk into a place and tell you whether or not there is a spirit presence. I feel it all over my back.
3 separate nights, and on each occasion, while I was in there working, I was joined by a very, very intense presence. I couldn't see it, but I could certainly feel it.
Clairvoyance is when you actually see the spirit in your mind's eye and they materialise in front of you, and you can actually see and describe what they look like. And then there's clairaudience, of which the actual spirit actually talk to you, so that then you can actually get a voice link with that spirit, of which actually sometimes is the strongest.
I don't consider myself psychic. To my frustration, I cannot communicate with spirit.
And as soon as the light went red, that's when it all kicked off, and she literally occupied the same space I was sitting in, and I couldn't breathe, and I was trying to indicate to him. I couldn't use my voice, literally had no air in my lungs, and I started to panic, and all he did was stand in front of me.
So yes, I pride myself in the fact that I'm sensitive, but I am loath to actually call myself psychic.
That's the most traumatic experience I've ever had with a ghost, and that's before I start ghost hunting. When you want something to happen when you ghost hunting, it rarely does.
I refer to myself as a healthy skeptic. Because of what I do, I get approached many, many times in a week with numerous types of ghost story. My rule of thumb is that I dismiss 90% of them as being complete and utter nonsense. 8% I dismiss as the effect of jinn goblins.
Let me draw your attention to the building across the road from where we're standing, the Marlborough Hotel. The building was actually established in 1787, and it's seen many, many guises before it settled as a hotel. It's even been a brothel.
And a couple of the guys that live upstairs are convinced that they have been visited by the ghosts of some of the working girls.
And it's linked to another building that was a brothel by an underground tunnel. Also, those 2 buildings, the Marlborough and that other building, are linked to the Royal Pavilion by an underground tunnel. Now, I'm not pointing the fingers at royalty, but they certainly had plenty of staff working there who would avail themselves of the services of such an establishment.
So they've woken up in the middle of the night with a ghostly lover, if you will, who they think might be kicking around after the brothel closed.
Almost 100 years after this place was established, in 1885, the most well-known family of residents moved in, the Packens, Thomas and his wife Lucy.
Tarek, who manages the theatre, is convinced that Lucy, who's the main ghost, is a helpful ghost.
He got up early one morning and found Lucy doing nothing particular, neither drunk nor sober, hovering about in the kitchen. In his usual charming manner, he said, "Go back to bed, woman." She refused. It's the worst thing she ever did in her life.
So Lucy was the landlady who was murdered by her husband, who was the landlord.
He flew into one of his usual frenzies, grabbed the first thing that came to hand, which happened to be a rather heavy stew pot, and swung it at her, hitting her around the back of the head. He actually drew blood, which splattered on him. But what drove him into a deeper frenzy than ever was the fact that Lucy remained standing on her feet. And no more was thought of the incident. It was one of those usual mornings in the Packham household. Until 3 days later, when both Lucy and Thomas were entertaining another of their regular customers, a local doctor. Lucy suddenly collapsed to the floor at the doctor's feet. Thomas stopped him, aiding her, saying, "She's always doing that, she's just attention seeking. Get up, woman." But she didn't. Lucy had dropped dead, literally.
The landlord, who then received a very short sentence by painting Lucy to be a loose woman and a bit of a lush. So she kind of kicks about still.
People get attached to places. They don't want to move on. It's something that they've done in their lives that's really bad and awful, and they won't move on, so they get attached to that sort of place. It could be a jealousy, it could be a murder, it could be anything, and they get attached to that sort of place.
Welcome to the Royal Albion Hotel.
We go round when the building is in daylight and measure the electromagnetic field in each room, especially around corners where there are electric sockets and that sort of thing.
Now there's a very, very cold room in this hotel, bitterly cold on the hottest of summer days. Many things have been tried over the years to try and sort the situation out, most of which have failed.
During the base reading, we make a note of the temperature of each area of the room, and then during an investigation, we're keeping an eye on the meter to see whether there is a sudden temperature drop or indeed a temperature rise.
I'm told by people that have stayed in one of those rooms that it is still unbearably cold, but the sort of cold you can put up with.
A heating engineer was brought in the 1980s. And whilst he was working in that room on his own, he received a vicious punch to the ear by an unseen fist.
It was that bad that his ear remained swollen and painful for 7 days after this incident.
But there is another possible regular guest that is responsible for that punch in the ear. And that's a gentleman called Robert Donston Stevenson, and I use the word gentleman very loosely.
He had a very unhealthy interest in the black arts. But the most compelling evidence is that Donston Stevenson's name appears very, very high on the list of suspects for the person responsible for the crimes of Jack the Ripper.
If indeed Robert Donston Stevenson was Jack the Ripper, and there are several people in Brighton who are absolutely convinced that he was responsible for many of those crimes, then a punch in the ear is just a part of what he's truly capable.
Now, when you get a malevolent spirit, this could be someone that, a person that doesn't want to go to the spirit world, that was very nasty in life, was actually quite wicked and not very good at all, and they can play havoc on you.
It also goes back to something I used to be told as a child by my mother. You have more to fear from the living than you do the dead. The dead can't hurt you. Oh yes, they can.
But with mediums and with normal people, we have guides, spiritual guides, and they will help you to move them away and to actually deal with the problems at hand if things get out of control or get out of hand.
Well, the place in which we're sat at the moment is the King's Arms. It's the oldest building in the area. It was built in 1701, but strangely didn't open its doors as a drinking establishment until 1799. But in the 1920s, there was a young couple that ran this place as a drinking establishment. And he found out that she had been unfaithful to him. And as you can imagine, it resulted in a blazing row. But that row ended in tragedy. It ended with him pushing her down the cellar steps. And she was apparently dead before she hit the bottom. To my knowledge, it is that lady's ghost that is the predominant paranormal feature of this building to this very day. A lot of phenomena in this building takes place down here in front of this blocked up tunnel. People have witnessed dark shapes crossing the tunnel, and a presence is frequently felt down here. And as you can understand, in most instances, she favours women over men. She seems to deliberately go out of her way to scare men.
This is another lady that is also resides from here, and she has got a dark shape to her. Now, there is a lot of residual that I can feel in here, and I'm just siphoning through it all. And Mary! They get associated to a place is because that's where they've lived, that's where they've loved, and that's where they've hated, and that's where they've murdered, that's where they've done everything. And they just, it's like an addiction to them for that place. Mary! She says, my name is Mary. And this lady hid a lot of things, and this is going back to 1800 type period. And oh dear, she was raped, she was pilferaged, and I'm going way back here. And by 3 gentlemen, I'm being told, thank you, 3 gentlemen. And also William is very, very, very connected, as what I want to say. As I would see them as a medium, I would see them as you would see yourself, you know, in the clothes and what they used to wear. Depending on the period that you're picking up, if it's a haunted place, you can more or less look and see what sort of dress they're wearing to know what sort of time period we're looking at. And now this lady, as I see her, she wears a black, sort of all in black, with a white lace at the front that goes down here, so it goes right down like this. And she's got a horrible teeth and 1 tooth remaining. To look at, she looks like a witch, but she's not. And she was brutally murdered, and her body, I believe, may not have even been found. It's took over my life, actually, because it was like when I very first started all those years ago, and I didn't know how to control it. It was completely out of control. And now I couldn't do without it. Because spirit and the psychic world is a part of me. As much as they're a part of me, I'm a part of them. Because I'm distraught. I feel as if I really want to cry, and I'm really taking on the persona of this lady who is absolutely distraught. And it's something I think that's in you. They speak to me, they see my light, they obviously know that I can see them, but it's about cutting off as well, which is very important, because sometimes if you don't cut off, they will just keep pounding you. And I would say I'm on a lower ground. I feel as if I want to go lower, I want to go down, because I feel as if I want to go out, and there is, if this could be found, this tunnel, there is something going on behind there, and I would say there is a body of a lady still trapped here today. Mary is very significant. That's what people are doing. They're trying, moving this to try and communicate the dead, and sometimes it can be very dangerous if nobody knows how to open and close it properly and try to send the move or any spirits that have come through on. That's why they can get attached to people.
Ghosts are more than plenty in Brighton. It's the second most haunted city in the country. Second only to York, in case you ask.
I want to ask the spirit world, the guides, the angels, and the love of peace. I want you now to visualise a white light as surrounded each one of us. We are now protected, and all spirits are now detached from us. Our guides and loved ones are with us, and we have this beautiful white light of love, God's light, and this is with us to take us home and to be safe. You are now safe. Amen.